All right, friends, it's time to give you loyal listeners a discount on protein powder. You may or may not know, but I launched my very first protein powder 2 years ago. It's a grass-fed beef isolate with only 3 ingredients: grass-fed beef, either organic cacao or organic vanilla, and organic monk fruit. Now, if you don't want any of the added flavor and sweeteners, you can also just get unflavored. And no matter what flavor you choose, you're getting over 23 grams of protein per scoop, which is going to keep you full and satisfied between meals. I love starting my day with a Fab4 smoothie and breaking my fast with that much protein. It makes a serious difference in my cravings and blood sugar balance the rest of the day, and I've seen it with my clients as well. Now, I never thought I'd own a product company, but when I got pregnant with Sebastian, I realized the majority of protein powders were chemically extracted or enzymatically extracted, and I wanted to use heat and water only. I wanted minimal ingredients because we don't need those emulsifiers, fillers, or added vitamins, minerals, and probiotics. All of those additions increase the chances that it's not going to work for your body, whether it be bloating, digestion issues. I just wanted pure, clean protein to keep you full and satisfied so you could build the most delicious Fab4 smoothie. And I have to say, I'm pretty proud of the flavor. If you take a look at our reviews on Amazon, you'll see 5-star reviews for flavor. And that is key, because if you don't love your Fab4 smoothie and you don't love drinking your protein powder, you're not going to do it. It won't become a habit, and it's consistency that outpaces everything. So if you're here and you're listening and you want to give our protein powder a try, use the code podcast5 for $5 off your order. And let me know if you love it. My favorite ways to apply this protein powder is in my Fab4 smoothie, making freezer fudge, making chocolate milk, making hot chocolate, and throwing the unflavored into all my kids' baked goods. So let me know how you use it. Let me know if you love it, and share this podcast deal with your friends. Dr. Kelly Brogan is a holistic psychiatrist and New York Times bestselling author. Her books include A Mind of Your Own, Own Yourself, and the children's book, A Time for Rain. She co-edited the landmark textbook, Integrative Therapies for Depression. She is the founder of the online healing program, Vital Mind Reset, and the membership community, Vital Life Project. She completed her psychiatric training and fellowship at NYU Medical School after graduating from Cornell University Medical College, and has a BS from MIT in systems neuroscience. She specializes in root cause resolution approach to psychiatric syndromes and symptoms. It's an absolute pleasure to welcome Dr. Kelly Brogan to the show. Kelly, thank you so much for joining me. I have been looking forward to this interview for, it feels like, months, and I've been following along since your first book, A Mind of Your Own, and I just can't thank you enough for spending time with me today.
It's a pleasure. Thanks.
Yeah. Well, for our audience who doesn't maybe know your work, can you give me a little bit of a background on how you got into the world of holistic psychiatry?
Yeah. So I often say that I think my most important contextual detail is that I used to be in the matrix and I used to really, really believe in all of the, certainly what we're seeing now in the world, the dominant orthodoxy around health being fundamentally a kind of random bad thing that you can struggle with at times, and you're best to take any precautions you possibly can, and also to comply with your doctor's orders once you are in care. And I became interested in psychiatry as a volunteer for a suicide hotline called Nightline at MIT, where I was in college, and there's probably still quite a prevalence of even completed suicides at that school for various sociocultural reasons. And I, kind of came under the spell that we had cracked the code of human suffering, and all that was needed was to connect those who were in need with the fix, which is psychotropics and, various antidepressants and anti-anxiety meds. And so it became really appealing to me as someone who had no experience herself, feeling feelings, understanding what emotions were there to convey, and really had great distress intolerance. Right, which is, I think, why most doctors actually go into medicine, is because it is so intolerable to us to sit with another human's discomfort or suffering that we must play the savior role, right? We must come in and do something about it so that our discomfort and suffering is alleviated. I really have come to understand that as I have worked on unpacking just how non-intimate a relationship I have had, with my own emotional experience, and certainly through the journeys I've witnessed many of my patients and online participants go through, and that is the anatomy of that journey. It is learning how to feel, coming into contact with disavowed parts of ourselves, and understanding the very important messages that our emotional struggles, cognitive struggles, physical symptoms are actually attempting to deliver. So, I went in asleep and, specialized actually in medicating pregnant and breastfeeding women. That's how much I believed in the essential nature of pharmacologic intervention. And my very dramatic wake up happened when I myself was diagnosed with a potentially chronic condition postpartum my first pregnancy, although the rumblings were already kind of being felt, because I chose to have a natural birth. I chose to eliminate all pharmaceuticals from my own household as a mother, even as I was prescribing to these women. And it was when I was looking down the barrel of taking a lifelong pharmaceutical that I said, hold on a minute, I don't want to do this, right? And at the time, I was given a book by a colleague called Anatomy of an Epidemic by Robert Whitaker, as you know, and that was just the affirmation. My life has been paved by the right resource, the right book at just the right moment. And it validates something, it's like a remembrance, right? That reclamation experience is really, it's not being taught something or learning something or being certainly convinced of anything. And from that book, I learned that the medications I was prescribing are actually perpetuating and propagating and maybe even inducing the very so-called pathology that I thought I was helping with. And I was able to take that in because I already had started on the path of healing what I was only ever told would be a chronic and potentially even disabling condition, Hashimoto's thyroiditis. So I felt, ready for a new perspective. And I never started a patient on medication again. That was back in 2010. And then went on to dedicate my practice to helping women come off of medication, and began to see really the natural history, so to speak, without, intervention, without restarting women on meds, of this withdrawal process. And that it was almost a kind of manufactured dark night of the soul, right? That would predictably emerge in all of the archetypal, layers of this hero or heroine's journey. And I had never seen something like that in my life. And because I was dedicated to, non-intervention in terms of, restarting pharmaceuticals to ameliorate the process or alleviate or kind of backstep, I just chose to be with these individuals and to fearlessly reflect to them that they can do this, they can make it through this, they were born for this. And the self that would be reclaimed on the other end would be the self that was always there, being rejected by none other than, this persona that they've been wearing, as a mask. And that began to set kind of a terrain for my own life. And I've been through many in a version of it now, actually, in my own life. But they get easier, these sheddings, as you understand that it's all a process of getting more intimate with yourself and abandoning yourself less and less. And what I mean by that is really, really understanding that the things that you feel, the bad feelings, quote unquote, that you feel are telling you that something is not aligned in your life. It could be what you're eating for breakfast, could be your job, could be your spouse, could be your best friend, could be your mom. And that there is a boundary there that you are in charge of maintaining. And this act of taking personal responsibility it's the path out of victimhood. And I have said many times that I believe that victimhood is the only human pathology, because it is predicated on the lie of powerlessness, and helplessness. That certainly as adults, we must disabuse ourselves of if we are ever to feel safe and whole and experience the full spectrum of emotions that we incarnated to experience.
I love that message so much. You're giving your clients and the women you work with, and I'm sure some men that you work with, the power and the ownership over their life. And I think what resonated with me is allowing them to feel the spectrum of emotions and Can you talk a little bit about like what that process might look like when you first start with a client, how they might start to analyze their life and understand what is holding them back from feeling, and how they start to unearth and shed these layers?
Yeah. Well, it starts certainly in a cultural context of understanding that there are certain feelings that are bad, right? And so if we decide that anger and sadness and shame are bad to feel, that we will be out of control of, the attachments and dependencies that we have cultivated. If we feel those things and likely be rejected by them, we'll lose connection if we express those things. Then, of course, I can speak from my own defensive structure. We will suppress those things, even beyond our own awareness. I mean, my defensive structure is so effective that I think I felt actual conscious fear for the first time maybe 2 years ago. I'm in my 40s, and that is not because I was never afraid. It's actually probably because I have been chronically afraid, only ever feeling unsafe, but that my coping mechanism and compensatory personality traits have been so effective at keeping me in this state of managed seeming stability, so that I never have to actually feel that. Now, most people, defensive strategies are not quite as effective as mine. And that's, what makes my journey potentially a bit more harrowing than some. Because if you're somebody like so many of my patients who has a lot of contact with shame and fear and grief and rage, and you're just barely keeping it below the surface, once you simply make the decision to be a companion to those feelings, which is the biggest decision you will ever make in your life. But it is a choice that when you're ready to make it is simply about turning towards rather than running away, projecting, blaming, and self-medicating, right? So the turning towards, I have found, is greatly facilitated. I wrote in my second book, that suffering ends where meaning begins. Like, it's greatly facilitated by a framework of understanding that can help you to embrace what's coming up as fundamentally meaningful, right? So if I feel alone and terrified and disconnected, what part of me is actually feeling that, right? Like, when did that actually start? When I was 3 or 4 or in the crib or at birth? And, I certainly am not somebody who has tremendous access to a lot of my childhood memories, save for some, that are in the spectrum of abuse. And I don't know how uncommon that is, but I certainly know a lot of people who, can't easily retrieve these memories. But as you commit to staying with your feelings rather than distracting yourself from them or running from them or coming up with a victim story that implicates something or someone outside of your life for how it is that you're feeling now, as if that's what's actually going on, versus it just being kind of a representation of something that's been yours for a long time, that's coming up for expression and ultimately reclamation, then you allow these feelings to bring you your own story that's in your consciousness and certainly subconscious realm, about when you might have first felt these feelings. And then you get to reparent, right? So this concept is gratefully penetrant in so much of what's out there now. And I don't remember ever hearing that word even 5 years ago, let alone, I'm sure it was out there, but it wasn't in the zeitgeist. And, the concept is that then you get to provide yourself what you didn't receive, right? So you get to hold yourself as you have a tantrum. You get to soothe yourself. You get to validate yourself. You get to provide what it is that would, offer to that child self an experience of true and deep and unconditional safety. And in that, there is a sort of completion. There is an experience of, oh, I am okay because I'm the one who can help me in this moment. And that integrates this part that has been hiding. And then that part gets to come in, right? And there's so much shame around this kind of ownership initially, because we feel like we will be punished, which maybe we were. We feel like we'll be punished by taking that responsibility for how it is that we might feel or what it is that we might have done ourselves to facilitate ourselves feeling that, right? So if I transgress my own boundary by fundamentally accepting a relationship condition or a situation or whatever without speaking up and allowing that to happen, even though it felt bad or wrong, I'm the one I'm upset with, right?
Yeah.
And it's my child self who's upset with my adult self, right? They're not integrated to understand that representing the needs and feelings of the child self, my best friend calls it like a guidance counselor would, not in overly attached demands, but simply, this is how I feel, this works for me, or this doesn't work for me. Then there's free will. You can't control someone else. You can't control the outside world, but getting clear on that and sticking to that through the discomfort of that, self-ownership is the most challenging work I think, I've ever done. But it's this reclamation process where ultimately we just keep picking up these pieces of ourselves, right? Like I have been picking up, the pieces of myself that are late, that are lazy, that say things wrong, that make mistakes, that are stupid, that are ashamed, that don't always look as if they have it all together. I think I canceled my first live interview I had a couple of weeks ago when one of my chickens passed away actually that morning, and I was devastated. And it was the first time in my entire career I've done something like that. That can't have been the first time I needed to do something like that, but it was the first time that I did. And what I felt was, they're going to be disappointed. And then I won't be able to say that I always am on time and always, stick to my word and my schedule and I'm reliable. And if I'm not those things, then what? Then what? And so you start to feel like, then what? Like, so what? You find out you didn't die. And as you accumulate these experiences, it becomes easier and easier, to understand, okay, this is the nature of it.
Wow, that's really powerful. It's like knowing, not only did you recognize that you needed that space, but you put the boundary up and against what would have maybe been a preconceived notion that you're going to look like a flake.
Yeah.
So there are two things I'd love to discuss with you, because I feel like for a lot of people, they may be almost like living underwater, where they're trying to hear, but all they hear is like garbling, and they're not really hearing clearly like what needs to happen in their life. And they may not even be experiencing their emotions. Like they're not experiencing the grief and the pain and the discomfort, but on the flip side, they're probably not experiencing that like absolute pure joy. Everything's sort of muted, or like, that kind of feeling like where you're really not living your life because of maybe suppressing emotion. And then talking about what the world expects of you and how that's influencing it. This kind of like clearing your ears and hearing things clearly and hearing your emotions clearly feels scary for a lot of us. And if we haven't felt or gone deep with our emotions and our childhood and asked ourselves, like, do I love my life right now? Does this feel good to me right now? It can be really scary, I feel like, to go through the process and then maybe wake up and go, oh wait, I don't really like anything going on right now. And can you talk about maybe how someone might approach starting to figure out what's working for them and what's not working for them? Like, are there tools that they may use, whether that's like journaling or reparenting? Like, how would someone physically do this in a day or, over a month or something like that?
Yeah. No, it's a great question, because I think that at a certain point, most of us recognize that there is something worse than pain and sadness and shame and all that. There's something worse, and it's numbness, right? That the experience of what you're describing as that narrow bandwidth of emotional range, that disavowal of even feeling states, is a kind of hell. And that's actually what most psychotropics offer. And at a certain point, for many of us who are destined to do this work, in our lineage or however you want to look at it, the soul rattles the cage, right? And there is an irresistible movement in the direction of change. And there's actually relief. I think it's the first feeling that starts to come when you move, right, in the direction of that change, right? You read that blog, you make that phone call, you make that appointment, you buy that book, whatever it might be. And I have come to understand that disconnection, that level of soul disconnection, is simply a response to a lack of safety, right? And it's a lack of safety, of course, within the self, because if you are not aligned and you're feeling totally terrorized by these emotional states that you're trying to keep at bay, there is no safety there. The world is just 100 million landmines to set off what is actually inside you, right? You're the traveling bomb, ultimately, right? And so that's why I am a big believer, and my bias is obviously towards, the approach that I recommend, which is the kind of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? So we don't start at reparenting. In my model, start wherever you want. But in my approach, sort of chopping wood and carrying water, as I call it, taking care of the physiologic imbalances that directly contribute to unsafety on a biological level. And how do we register unsafety? It's called inflammation, right? It's the messenger that recruits resources. It's not meant to be in an ongoing way, but it is for most of us, to manage a perceived stressor that feels bigger than us, right? That perception can be subconscious, right? It doesn't have to be that what's wrong with your life and what's, threatening you. So I am a big believer in, the protocol that's in my books and online as Vital Mind Reset. We break it down in our membership in Vital Life Project if the deep dive doesn't feel available to you, into sort of baby steps. But I am a big believer in the deep dive. When you're ready, go big or go home. You don't want to keep yourself in that bardo for one day longer than you have to, because it only gets easier and better as you move through this ritual, because that's really what it is. It's a ritual of self-initiation, which we never experienced as adolescents because we have relinquished any heritage or indigenous contact that would help us understand that there is a false parenting, community-pleasing self that must die in order for us to make contact with the authentic self that can risk judgment, that can risk isolation, that can risk all manner of rejection and still survive, right? That fear, that contact with fear, learning to master that fear as a figment, really, in most cases of narration, is what initiation is supposed to offer. And of course, we just kind of go to college in our extended childhood until we're 21 years old, never even making decisions for ourselves, taking care of ourselves, contributing our gift to the world, following nothing but orders. And then somehow we're magically meant to have resolved all of these complexities of our inner world so that we can step into our adult shoes. Of course, that's ridiculous, right? So the field, I think, that has grown around Vital Mind Reset has taken on a life of its own and now supports this process for people. And I do believe that's it, because the bare bones of the program, you can see in the book, I'm not sure they could ever explain the outcomes that we've enjoyed and experienced. And so there has to be something more here, that is this big energy field, or as Rupert Sheldrake would call it, like a morphic field of, the potential energy for change that you tap into when you commit. And I am a no nonsense kind of gal. And I do believe that discipline and self-commitment and the power of choice have a very specific role, not to self-flagellate and keep you in this kind of like self-punishing, like, oh, I better do my meditation or I'm a bad person kind of thing, right? And all the orthorexia and rigidity that can extend deep into the wellness journey. But in this ritual, in this initiation process, it is essential. This is a no cheating, not once, not one molecule kind of a nutritional program. And the same goes with the other components, which are, again, very basic, which is self-education or unbrainwashing, detox, and contemplative practice or meditation on a daily basis. And when you take care of these lifestyle commitments and you begin to feel changes in your brain fog, in your bowel movements, in your joint pain, which can happen within 1 month, you are receiving the impossible to forget message that your choices are the reason that change and relief is coming now. Not because of some doctor, some pill, or, there's not even supplements in this program, not one. So it's nothing other than your choices to care for yourself on a daily basis and to prioritize attention in the realm of the things that you can control in your life, to foster that, what I call the signal of safety coming from all these different directions, right? So that you can unwind just enough to be able to garner the resources required to then go on the real meat and potatoes of the journey, right? Which is looking at all of those areas of your life you thought you could ignore until you died, right? So turning over those stones, getting super real with yourself, understanding that, there are things that you wish you could unknow that you already know, that are disempowering you, and you're the one making the choice. But the choice is not to make disempowering decisions. The choice is to turn away from the feeling state. That is so difficult to be with. It is time consuming. It requires courage. It requires loss, because there will be relationships that end. There will be jobs that end. You may need to move to another country, right? There are major seeming risks that we thought we could avoid by not doing this work. And the truth is, of course, anyone who's been on this path knows that it's the expansion, it's the butterfly coming out of the chrysalis. You wouldn't have wanted to stay a gooey, melted caterpillar inside, right? But going through that tiny hole, I'm sure, is pretty terrifying and feels like a kind of a death. And so, only after the kind of psychological work of that kind of emotional self-intimacy does then, I think, spirituality kind of take on a role, and understanding, okay, I've connected to myself. Now what is it to connect to the divine for me, right? What does that look like? And for it not to be an escape hatch, for it not to be itself a coping mechanism or an avoidance of the bad, dark feelings, so that you can get a little hit of the light. And, that's what I see in a lot of the, self-appointed spiritual gurus out there, is there's so much focus on, the oneness and the rainbows and the unicorns of connection, that the deep intimacy with self is relinquished. And then, of course, these, shadow games and projections get played out on the broad scale. I mean, I've seen almost every spiritual teacher collapse under the weight of the current agenda, for example, with no capacity to see the projection of the shadow onto, let's say, a particle called a virus, or something like that, because that shadow work has not been foregrounded in, the kind of spirituality that is dominant in the New Age, for example, now.
Wow. Really, really amazing. Just like reiterating what you said, that the foundation, I feel like the nutrition and taking care of yourself, whether it's through meditation and a clear commitment to yourself, is a gateway. It's almost like that commitment creates the confidence that people have to attack whatever it is that they need to unearth, open up, experience, feel, to then release and connect. I love that is your starting place. I think in the last decade of working with clients, there have been moments where I've worked with a client and then they're getting a divorce, or I've worked with a client and then they're changing jobs. And it's this amazing confidence that comes from taking care of yourself. And what you say is creating safety by those daily practices that prove to yourself you can do it. And they're little steps, but it is that commitment, that unwavering commitment, that I think creates an opening in a tunnel to see, like, where am I going? What do I need to do here? I love that you're breaking down spiritual gurus, because I think a lot of us look outside of ourselves to learn how to connect with ourselves. And then we miss the boat of that intimate connection with ourselves. I think we all really want it. We just don't know how to start. And I love that you start with food and lifestyle and meditation. I think that is an amazing, amazing place to start. When it comes to what we've dealt with in the past, whether that's recognizing our childhood emotions or generational trauma, how can someone start to make the space for and start to realize what some of those common experiences are for people, and if they have generational trauma or how to recognize their childhood emotions in the present?
Yeah. So whenever you feel upset, blame, or judge, it's pretty simple, right?
Okay.
And, as far as I know, that describes most of our behavior most of the time. I mean, I've been on this path for some time, not as long as some, but very dedicated to it. And sometimes I feel like, have I made any progress? Like because of how what you cultivate is then a watching eye, right? And so then you see yourself trying to lie to yourself, right? So I might, get into a judgy, blamey place about, the government and, what they're up to, with a very well hidden victim story underneath there. And I might see myself do that and then justify it to myself. So this is how adept the shadow, so-called shadow is, right? And the shadow, for those who don't know, I guess, has been described in many different ways, but is the arsenal of defense that keeps us from feeling the feeling we don't want to feel. That is itself beneath our awareness. And it encourages us to experience that feeling as a result of what someone else is doing to us, and maybe, or their character traits or their personality, which of course are invoked into our, space and our life, attracted, so that we can see that actually that's what we have going on downstairs, so that we have the opportunity to bring that part of us into ourselves. So, wherever you feel the hot spots in your life, right? Where do you feel unsafe? Where do you feel scared? Where do you feel violated? Where do you feel betrayed? How do you feel abandonment? I mean, I struggle with massive abandonment issues. I never knew that. I am so mercenary that I would think, I don't need anyone. I got this, totally independent woman. I don't need a man, that kind of thing. It's not your conscious narrative. It's the feeling that is going to tell you, right? So I feel feelings as like a tightness in my chest. Sometimes people feel it like in their belly. Sometimes people feel a tension in their head or their shoulders are like this, right? It'll be a sensation inside that tells you this is not safe. I don't like this, right? But what's actually happening is that there is a part of you that wants attention, not from the person that you think. I mean, yes, partially, but fundamentally from you, right? So how might I look at what I judge, let's say, for example, in the government to be totalitarian, authoritarian, control-based dehumanization? Put it like,
I like it.
Yeah. And I say that's wrong and bad. We deserve to be treated better, right? What's happening there is I am potentially projecting the part of me that has all of those qualities. And I am disliking, blaming, and judging it on the outside and super upset about it because I don't want to acknowledge that I myself have those qualities. And so I get to feel myself as good as in the savior, also the victim, right? So I'm the false savior in a way. And then I get to judge the villain or the persecutor. And this triangle is a never-ending thing that you will never escape from until and if you take total responsibility for your choices and role. And this is what I have whole websites devoted to me, victim shaming or whatever. And I'm not backing down because I know it's the way out. And that means that you always have choice. You always have empowerment, not always over others, over your conditions, but in the ways in which you are abandoning yourself and the deep feelings that are coming up in order to narrate the victim story, right? So I think that the first feeling that comes up when we do this work and how you're kind of on the path. I've done a lot of this work with my best friend, Tara Collins. And, when she would kind of like help me to see what I was judging or blaming, let's say in a relationship or whatever, there was something for me to be with in myself. I always felt so much shame when she would say it and defensiveness. The shame probably I wasn't even aware of initially, but the defensiveness is the clue that there's shame there, right? And so it feels like, oh my God, no, I can't feel this because then I have to be wrong. And you start to experience, okay, like it's not being wrong. It's just that I didn't know how to feel this. I just didn't know how to feel whatever it is, that I was trying to avoid feeling. So you really just kind of do a survey of the hotspots in your life. And when you're ready, you can start to understand what it is that it means to you to feel out of control in a certain dynamic, or is somebody really a threat to you? What is the nature of what they're bringing up in you? And how have you self-abandoned in order to participate in that more fully? Right? Because, many teachers say, and I agree, like, you're hit once, but then when you're hit twice, you chose to stay.
Right.
And that's not to suggest that escaping from abusive dynamics is easy or is even available to most of us for, the duration of the experience. But there comes a point at which you recognize that you have chosen connection and the experience of your own, sort of authority figure as being somehow, in connection with you over your connection to yourself. Right? Honoring yourself, honoring your feelings, honoring your boundaries, no matter what, because there will always be risk that you perceive and you tell yourself is the reason you shouldn't do that. Right? That's actually where the choice lies, is in, the narration, the personal responsibility, and the allegiance to oneself, and the feeling states that we experience.
I love it, because so much of our childhood, or so I feel like for me, at least personally, growing up is I'm the oldest of three girls. It's parent pleasing. It's much of that through college, as you mentioned, and then getting into people pleasing outside of parent pleasing. And you're really coaching people to put their oxygen mask on first and to deal with those emotions and to sit with those emotions. Can you give me an example of that reflection, shame? Can you give me an example of what that might, like maybe with a personal relationship, or an example with a client, like of what that looked like, and then them being defensive and working through that emotionally in the moment? Because I do think that recognizing that you're judging someone, or that something's coming up for you about someone else is just a mirrored reflection of yourself. Then we need to work on that, right? And
yeah, for sure. Oh gosh, so many examples. But I'll give a recent one. So my youngest daughter is 9.5, and she is a total empath and extremely permeable. So is my male cat. So I got a couple of them in my midst, just taking on everyone's stuff all the time, right? So often she'll feel emotions that she really doesn't even know what they have to do with or where they're coming from, and it'll just be like this massive, volcano coming out of her. My first daughter is very suppressed, like me, which is, largely something I co-created and I am dedicated to helping her out of for the rest of her life. When you know better, you do better.
I love that.
And not a moment sooner. But, so my younger daughter often appears to me to be very dramatic, is the word I would use. And I don't like drama. I don't like it. I don't like hysterical behavior. I don't like people feeling like looking to me like they're out of control of their emotions or their intellect in their kind of like animal brain. Mm-hmm. And so, we've been having some challenges because in this window, she has decided that she doesn't actually want to go anywhere outside of the house. Right. So nothing, no, events, play dates, no, nothing. She loves gymnastics, doesn't want to go anymore. And she decided that she feels anxious when she's out and about, and she doesn't want, to risk feeling sick, she calls it, right? And so, I don't really care. I have a very sort of like on the unschooling side of things, like kind of approach where I'm never going to force her to do anything. If she doesn't want to go, she doesn't have to go. And I don't have necessarily a separate agenda. However, there have been certain instances where she says she wants to do something, and then actually when the moment comes, she has this whole hysterical thing as if she's fighting with me, as if I want her to do it, when she's the one who said she wanted to do it. It's kind of crazy gaslighting, kind of trigger for me. And I said to her, listen, I will help you in all the ways I know how to help, but I don't want the drama and power play of like fighting with me about it. I'm on your team. Right. Yeah. And she came to me, the other day in the bathroom, and she came up to me and she said, Mama, this is gonna make me cry. She said, see, that's the shame I feel.
Yeah.
She said, when you said that you don't want drama, I feel like you don't want me. And she's so like astute, right? Like if only we had, what it takes to be real with our parents, the way that she is very real with me. And in that moment, I was condemned, right? And I knew that I had messed up. And how I had messed up was to manipulatively suggest that there are certain ways that she can express herself that are okay for me, and then ways that are just not okay. And the way she'll know they're not okay is because I'm going to withdraw affection, attention, and my heart energy, and I will just turn cold. I don't yell, and I certainly don't hit my kids, and I don't have temper tantrums because I don't do drama, right? Yeah. And so why don't I do drama? What do I hate so much about drama? Why can't people express however they express as long as it's like nonviolent? Yeah. And the reason is because I have a totally suppressed drama queen inside me who was told to stay in the closet probably from a very early age. And so now I judge that. It scares me and it makes me uncomfortable. And then I try to control it in whatever way I can. But that blaming, like you're doing this, don't do this, is hiding that I feel shame about this part of me because I've constructed a whole personality based on defending my way and judging this other way. So how can I also be that other way? That means I was wrong.
Yeah.
Right. And it's just, it feels like it's going to kill you, like just owning this. It's not, right? Of course it's not. And, I'm still iterating, because there's also a lot in self-help and like strategies, right? Especially in the emotional realm, especially in parenting, that still conveys, so what did I do with her? Flower remedies, tapping, meditation and breathing, visualization, different kinds of somatic work. And because I did those things before, I simply offered her as many experiences as necessary of me being with her while she feels what she feels without needing to fix it, soothe it, or do anything. Simply reflecting to her, this feeling is not a bad feeling. It deserves to exist and it's okay for it to be here. Right? So skipping that step, which you skip if fundamentally it feels unsafe to be around a certain energy, of course you skip it, right? Because then you want to not feel, I don't want to feel what I feel. So I'm helping her to not feel what she's feeling. It's so hard that I have compassion, for myself and everyone, as we try to figure this out. And I just try to keep it reminding myself, like, as it becomes easier, it becomes easier. And until, we get through the great resistance that we have fundamentally to simply being with these so-called negative states, or even labeling them as negative, rather than these just all being different signature energies, that we can come to understand are messaging something to us. That's really important, right? So she helped me to see that I have this whole part of me that's never been really expressed, let alone, it's never even been owned. And that's why I feel scared around that energy. And that's why I judge it and blame it. Like, so what can I do to create safer conditions for myself? I could even tell her, listen, I feel afraid myself on some level, even though I know nothing is wrong and that I'm safe. I know that in my mind, when you scream and yell, And so I'm going to do everything I can to make sure that I help myself in those moments. I might need a minute to do that. And then I am here with you totally and completely, So it's very, very humbling process.
I love that, because that example is it was it obviously hit me hard as a parent, because you start to feel emotion when you see your child feel emotion. It brings up a lot in you. And a lot of moms say that their kids are their biggest and greatest teachers. But I love that example, because not only did you realize that you needed to sit with her and be there with her for her emotions, but you're learning to do that with yourself as well. And that practice of this, all emotions are energies and they aren't labeled, but that they need to be felt. And we need to just sit with ourselves or sit with our children through them is the greatest gift you could ever give your children. The fact that she could even say that sentence, as emotional as it was, is just really a powerful gift.
And the truth is that I cannot walk the walk with someone else, including, my partner, until I do it for and with myself. So I can know, as I wrote a book about this years ago, Own Yourself, right? Like, I know I get this stuff. I know what this personal responsibility track is made of, right? But the truth is that I abandon myself when I try to keep myself from feeling how distressing her emotions are. Mm-hmm. And then I end up trying to control her.
Right.
She feels it and it don't feel good. So then she's going to, feel little hits of power in defying me, even in the, when I'm like, what do you mean? Like, we're doing this together. But the truth is, I cannot simply be with her until and if I know how to do that with myself. And that's what it all comes down to. Like, you can't help somebody else in any sort of a meaningful way until and if you understand what it is to be with these challenging emotions in your own life.
Oh, Dr. Kelly Brogan, this podcast, I mean, when I think about the reverberations that are going to happen and the change just having you here is going to make in so many people's lives. No one is teaching us how to have an intimate relationship with ourselves. No one is teaching us how to break free from being a parent pleaser, a people pleaser, and to really get to know ourselves, to feel our emotions, to sit with ourselves, and to make real meaningful change in our life like you are. You've been beating your drum for so many years, and I can't thank you enough for being here, for being vulnerable, for even talking about personal stories, because I think a lot of times people look to experts like you, doctors like you, and they think they have it all figured out and they don't have missteps and I think this life is a journey of lessons and we just have to be committed to growth.
Couldn't agree more.
Thank you so much, Kelly. Where can people find you, follow along, and if they are interested, join the Vital Mind Reset?
Yeah, so the best way, given what my team and I joke is the censorship shuffle, the best way to, stay in contact is through our free newsletter, which is at kellybroganmd.com. I have a Telegram channel now, but who knows, right? How long that's going to be there. Although it's fun. It's a fun place with a lot of resources at the moment. And yeah, we shall see.
Okay. Well, I will put all your links in the show notes so people can follow along and find you. And thank you again so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Be Well by Kelly. Please subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Learn more at bewellbykelly.com and follow me on Instagram at bewellbykelly. I would love if you picked up my books, Body Love and Body Love Every Day. They're sold on Amazon and at all major booksellers.